Hey guys! Tonight, let's all do the sensible thing and lower the lights a little. Maybe put the phone face down. Get comfortable. Nothing urgent is going to happen here. This is one of those stories that moves very slowly, on purpose, the way old houses creak at night when everyone insists they're asleep, but no one really is. Tonight, we're drifting into the soft, beige tragedy of a wealthy family that looked perfect from the outside and was extremely not. Of course it wasn't. We're going to spend some time with a prosperous, early modern dynasty I'll call the House of White, because they were obsessed with appearing pure, benevolent, and morally upright, which, historically speaking, is never a good sign. When a family insists too loudly that they're generous, charitable, and just trying to help, you should probably check where the money is going. And then check again. And maybe don't marry into it. So let's ease into this. No wars, no executions, just ledgers, quiet manipulation, and a woman slowly realizing she has been financially erased by people who smile at her across the dinner table. Our main figure tonight is Lady Jennifer of White, born into a respectable merchant academic household in the late 17th century. Not poor, not aristocracy, comfortably clever. Educated enough to be useful, but not powerful enough to be protected, which is always the most dangerous place to be. Jennifer was known in her youth for being sharp, not loud about it, just observant. She could read accounts, she understood trade, she noticed patterns, all deeply inconvenient traits for the family she would eventually marry into. She met Sir Grant White in her early 30s, which by the standards of the time already made her a little late. People were starting to worry, and by people, I mean distant relatives with nothing better to do than worry about her uterus. Grant was presentable, not brilliant, not cruel at first glance, just very confident in the way men tend to be when they've never had to doubt themselves. He came from money that had been old for maybe 2 generations, which meant the family acted as though it had existed since the Romans. They hadn't, but they felt like they had. Grant was charming in a soft, exhausting way. He agreed with you a lot. He nodded. He listened. He told Jennifer he admired her mind, which should always make you a little nervous. Their courtship was efficient, warm, polite. No fireworks, no scandals, just a smooth slide into marriage that everyone approved of because it looked correct. Jennifer married Grant and entered the White household thinking she was joining a partnership. What she was actually doing was stepping into a system that had been carefully designed to absorb women and quietly shut them down. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Grant encouraged her to rest, to step back from her teaching and consulting work. Just temporarily, of course. The household needed settling. The estate accounts were complex. It would be easier if one of them focused on domestic matters. This is always how it starts. Not with force, with convenience. Jennifer agreed to pause her work. She told herself it was temporary. She still read, she still thought, she still noticed that her personal funds were being consolidated into family accounts. Grant handled the money now, because of course he did. Over the first 2 years of marriage, Jennifer found that asking for money required explanations, receipts, justifications. Why did she need this much for clothing? Did she really need new books? Hadn't she already purchased paper this month? It was framed as responsibility, care, order. Grant never raised his voice. He just sighed a lot. Hovering over all of this was Lady Lydia White, Grant's mother, the true center of gravity in the household. Widowed young, sharpened by decades of managing men who believed they were in charge, she wasn't loud, she didn't need to be. Lydia ran the family's charitable arm, known publicly as the White Hope Trust, a benevolent institution dedicated to relief, education, and moral improvement. People praised it constantly, donors loved it, clergy adored it. And it was, how shall we say, extremely flexible with money. Funds flowed in, funds flowed out. No one could ever quite trace where everything ended up, but that was normal, apparently. Charity was messy. Accounting was dull. Why look too closely? Jennifer looked closely, because that was her mistake. She still knew how numbers worked. By the 4th year of her marriage, Jennifer had been functionally isolated. Her correspondence was slow. Visits were discouraged. Her social circle had narrowed to people connected to the Whites, and everyone spoke the soft language of gratitude and duty. She began to notice irregularities in the trust's ledgers, small transfers, then larger ones, money moving through intermediary merchants, shell partnerships, though they wouldn't have called them that yet, foreign accounts in friendly ports. Grant brushed off her questions. Lydia smiled and said Jennifer was overthinking things, which is always code for please stop thinking. The final shift came when Jennifer realized she no longer had independent access to funds at all. Her dowry, gone into the family pool. Her inheritance, managed on her behalf. Her household allowance, strictly monitored. She was wealthy on paper and utterly powerless in practice. Let's just pause there for a moment, because this is where the story really lives, not in dramatic confrontations, but in the slow realization that you cannot leave because you cannot pay for the door. Jennifer did something dangerous. She pretended nothing was wrong. She smiled, she complied, she played the role of the grateful wife who trusted her husband completely. By day, she was docile. At night, she copied numbers, she memorized names, she tracked transfers in her head because she had no paper she could trust. She found an unexpected ally in Marlon Pierce, a junior clerk who had once attended her lectures years earlier. He noticed her noticing things. He quietly confirmed what she already knew. The trust was laundering money, large sums, through charitable fronts in foreign holdings, and the family assumed Jennifer would never be a problem because she was financially dependent, and because they believed gratitude equaled loyalty. It didn't. For weeks, months really, Jennifer lived a double existence, the obedient lady of the house and the silent accountant, building a case in her own mind. She waited, she watched, she let them underestimate her. Because if history teaches us anything, it's this: the most dangerous person in a powerful household is the one everyone thinks is harmless. And with that thought gently humming in the background, let's drift forward, slowly, quietly, toward the moment when the House of White began to realize it had made a very expensive mistake. When we last drifted off, the House of White was still very confident, which is usually when history clears its throat. Nothing outward changed at first. That's the part people always skip when they tell these stories later. They jump straight to exposure, disgrace, and consequences. But before any of that, there is a long, beige stretch of pretending everything is fine. Jennifer perfected this phase. She woke at the same hour. She attended meals. She complimented Lydia's management of the household. She thanked Grant for handling the finances so carefully, which, if you say it slowly enough, can mean almost anything. Grant liked routine. He liked predictability. He liked believing his household was calm because of him, and Jennifer gave him exactly that illusion. Meanwhile, the White Hope Trust continued its gentle river of money. Funds arrived from donors who wanted their names engraved somewhere tasteful. Funds left toward shipping firms, overseas merchants, and vaguely defined administrative costs. The numbers never quite matched. They didn't need to. No one audited charity unless forced to. Lady Lydia was particularly proud of this system. She had built it over decades. A woman who had learned early that overt power was frowned upon, so she chose the quieter route. Committees, boards, signatures that required her approval. Always her approval. She liked to remind people that she had raised Grant alone. That sacrifice had become her moral currency. She spent it freely. Jennifer watched Lydia closely, not with hatred, with study. Lydia didn't panic. She didn't rush. She moved money the way some people rearrange furniture, calmly, confidently, assuming the house would always belong to her. And why wouldn't she assume that? Grant trusted his mother completely, which is not unusual, but he also trusted that Jennifer would never act against him, which was optimistic. One evening, during a perfectly dull dinner, Lydia mentioned an upcoming reconciliation banquet. 200 guests, donors, clergy, important families, a celebration of unity and moral renewal. Jennifer smiled and nodded. Inside, she filed the information away. Because large public events always require money, and money leaves trails. Over the following weeks, Jennifer noticed larger transfers. Not dramatic, just slightly careless. Urgency tends to do that, especially when people believe they are untouchable. She began quietly recording conversations, not in the dramatic sense, no hidden devices, just detailed recollections written later in a hand so neat it could have passed for devotion. Grant talked freely at home. He complained about donors, about oversight, about how tedious it was to keep appearances aligned with reality. He never imagined Jennifer would use any of this. Why would she? She didn't even have her own funds. This is where history becomes repetitive. Men have underestimated women in their households for thousands of years. It almost never works out for them. The first real crack came from an unexpected source, Claire, a distant cousin by marriage and frequent visitor. Claire was useful, discreet, and deeply careless. She handled correspondence for the trust when Lydia grew tired. She knew just enough to be dangerous, and one afternoon she sent Jennifer a packet of account summaries by mistake. It was meant for Lydia. It included offshore transfers, foreign holdings, names that did not appear anywhere public. Jennifer did not react immediately. She thanked Clara politely, filed the documents away, and slept very well that night, because now she had something tangible, something undeniable. Through Marlon, she reached out to officials who oversaw commercial crimes, quietly, cautiously. She framed it as academic curiosity, then concern, then evidence. For 8 weeks, Jennifer lived under careful observation. Not house arrest, not freedom either. She continued her role while cooperating fully behind the scenes. Grant noticed she was calmer, which he interpreted as submission. Of course he did. Lydia noticed nothing, which was worse. The reconciliation banquet arrived on a warm evening. Candles, music, soft speeches about charity and virtue. The House of White had never looked more respectable. Jennifer stood beside Grant, smiling at guests who praised her grace. Somewhere between the soup and the dessert, officials arrived, politely, quietly, with documents. No shouting, no drama, just the slow, procedural unraveling of a system that had relied on silence. Grant was confused more than angry. Lydia was furious, not loud, controlled, the worst kind. Charges followed, trials followed, sentences followed, long ones. Jennifer testified calmly, accurately, without embellishment. When it was over, she retained what was legally hers, not everything, just enough. She left the House of White without ceremony, no farewell, no reconciliation. Later, she would establish a small consulting practice, quiet, focused, helping other women understand the systems that trapped them. No grand speeches, no revenge monologues, just knowledge passed along one careful explanation at a time. And as the House of White faded into polite disgrace, Jennifer moved forward, not loudly, not dramatically, just free. Let's rest there for a moment, because the softest revolutions are always the most complete. And when you're ready, we'll float onward to another family that mistook control for permanence. After scandals end, There's always a strange quiet. Not peace, just the absence of pretending. The House of White didn't collapse in flames. It sagged, slowly, like a building that had relied on very specific beams only to discover they were decorative. The estate remained standing. The portraits stayed on the walls. The servants still moved through the halls, softer now, as if sound itself might attract consequences. But the confidence was gone, and confidence, as it turns out, had been doing most of the work. Grant was confined first to waiting rooms, then to courtrooms, then to long corridors with benches that were intentionally uncomfortable. He spent a great deal of time being asked questions he did not like, questions he believed he should not have to answer. He was, throughout all of this, deeply offended. Grant never quite understood what had happened, not really. In his mind, things had simply gone wrong, systems had failed, people had overreacted. Jennifer, somehow, had betrayed him. This was the narrative he clung to because it was the only one that allowed him to sleep. He told anyone who would listen that he had trusted her, which was true, just not in the way he thought. Lydia, on the other hand, understood perfectly. She sat very straight during proceedings, corrected minor details when allowed, accepted nothing resembling guilt. Her sentence was long, longer than anyone expected for a woman of her age and standing. But she had underestimated something vital. Paper does not care who you are. Her time in confinement was orderly, predictable. She continued to believe, to the end, that she had been wronged, that the world had changed its rules without consulting her. It had not. She had simply relied on silence for too long. Claire vanished into a quieter fate, a plea, a reduced sentence, minimum security. She wrote letters to no one in particular and received few replies. History tends to forget the enablers faster than the architects. Jennifer watched all of this from a distance, not emotionally removed, just finished. She finalized her separation without theatrics, no public statements, no memoir, no interviews. She moved into a smaller house with rooms that belonged entirely to her. She purchased her own paper, her own ink, her own locks. There was a moment, not long after everything concluded, when Jennifer stood in her study and realized no one could tell her no. Not softly, not politely, not at all. It was almost unsettling. She began her consulting work slowly, not branding it as rebellion or recovery, just education, workshops, private consultations, women who had been told their confusion was a personal failing. Jennifer explained accounts, trusts, shared property, the gentle mechanics of control. She did not dramatize. She did not frighten anyone. She simply laid out how dependence is constructed, piece by piece, and how it can be dismantled the same way. Her name never became famous, which suited her perfectly. The House of White, meanwhile, became a cautionary footnote, mentioned in legal circles, whispered about at charity events, an example of how not to structure things. Donors redirected their generosity, committees dissolved, the trust name disappeared from letterheads. People moved on, they always do. There was one final ripple that mattered most to Jennifer. Her son, Ethan, who had spent his early years absorbing tension without language. Children always do. He struggled at first. Confusion, embarrassment, the quiet grief of realizing a parent is not who you thought they were. Jennifer did not rush him. She answered questions when he asked them. She did not explain away the truth or soften it beyond recognition. Over time, Ethan learned something rare, that authority is not the same as correctness, that control is not care, that love does not require permission slips. He grew steadier, calmer, and that, perhaps, was the most lasting consequence of all. If you visit the old White estate now, you'll find it maintained but unloved. The gardens are trimmed, the halls echo, the portraits watch nothing in particular. Power, when removed, leaves behind very ordinary rooms. Jennifer sometimes thinks about Lydia, not with anger, with a kind of anthropological curiosity, how much energy it takes to maintain an illusion, how exhausting it must have been to never relax. But mostly, Jennifer thinks about nothing at all, which is the real luxury. So let's let the House of White rest. Not redeemed, not condemned, just finished. And as we gently drift onward into the soft twilight of another family, another system, another carefully managed disaster, remember this historical truth. Empires rarely fall to rebellion. They dissolve when the wrong person learns how the books are kept. And that, my friends, is always a very sleepy way for history to end. When a powerful family falls apart, it doesn't vanish. It lingers. In habits, in paperwork, in the way people hesitate before saying a certain name out loud. The House of White entered this phase quietly. There were no more court dates to attend, no officials arriving with polite urgency, just the long administrative afterlife of a disgraced dynasty. Assets were reassigned, properties were evaluated, letters were written in very careful language. Everything became extremely boring, which is how institutions prefer it. Jennifer was done participating. She attended only what she had to, signed only what was necessary. She had learned, painfully and thoroughly, the value of selective attention. What remained was the psychological residue, the part no ledger ever captures. Years of being told she was irresponsible with money had left a faint echo. Even with full control of her accounts restored, Jennifer still paused before purchases, still explained herself aloud sometimes, still caught herself justifying needs that required no justification. This, too, is part of history, the aftershocks. Her consulting work expanded slowly. She refused rapid growth, refused investors, refused anything that smelled like dependency. Women came to her quietly, some married into merchant houses, some into minor nobility, some into families that looked generous from a distance. Jennifer never told them what to do. She showed them where to look. She taught them how to read agreements, how to notice when shared actually means monitored, how generosity can be structured as a leash. She did not use the word abuse unless they did first. She let the realization arrive on its own. It always did. Meanwhile, Grant adjusted poorly. Confinement stripped him of the context that had supported his sense of self. No dinners, no deference, no quiet systems smoothing over mistakes. He wrote letters, some to Jennifer, some to officials, all of them explaining how misunderstood he was. Jennifer did not reply. Lydia, aging rapidly now, spent her days reorganizing her thoughts as if they were still files. She planned appeals that would never come. She reviewed memories for errors that were not there. For someone who believed so strongly in structure, unstructured time was a punishment in itself. The White estate passed into distant hands. Cousins, trustees, people with no emotional investment in the name. Rooms were repurposed, furniture sold, portraits relocated to less prominent walls. History is very good at rearranging things once the original owners are no longer watching. Jennifer visited the estate one last time to retrieve a box of books she had forgotten. No one recognized her, which felt appropriate. She walked through rooms where she had once whispered, rooms where she had learned to disappear. They were just rooms now. She left without ceremony. The gate closed behind her with a soft sound that meant nothing at all. Ethan grew older. He asked sharper questions. He noticed patterns sooner than most. Jennifer answered honestly, not emotionally. She trusted him with the truth because she trusted him with himself. He learned, gradually, that love does not require submission, that wealth does not equal safety, that silence is sometimes strategic but never virtuous. This knowledge settled into him gently, like something that had always been his. And this, perhaps, is where we let the story widen. Because the House of White was not unique, it was typical. Families like this appear throughout history. Different names, same architecture. A central figure who manages money, a public-facing virtue, a private system of control, and someone inside who is expected to be grateful. Sometimes that person never notices. Sometimes they notice and cannot leave, and sometimes, quietly, they learn how the system works better than its creators ever expected. Jennifer did not dismantle the House of White out of vengeance. She dismantled it because she understood it, which is always more dangerous. As time moved on, her name faded from association with the scandal. People remembered the crime. They forgot the woman. She preferred it that way, because anonymity is a kind of freedom elites rarely anticipate. So as we drift onward toward another carefully maintained lineage, another soft-spoken disaster, keep this in the back of your mind. History is not only written by conquerors, it is edited by survivors, and the edits are often very quiet. Let's float forward now. No urgency, no drama. Just the slow, familiar hum of power learning once again that it is not immortal. By the time enough years had passed, the House of White had become a story people told incorrectly. That's usually how you know time is doing its job. Details blurred, motives simplified. Someone always insisted the whole thing had been exaggerated. Another person claimed they had always suspected something, which is the historical equivalent of saying nothing at all. Jennifer listened to none of it. Her life had narrowed in the best possible way. Fewer obligations, fewer explanations. Days structured by choice rather than permission. She discovered a fondness for routine that belonged to her alone. Morning walks, quiet breakfasts, work done slowly, deliberately, without an audience. Power had once surrounded her like a wall. Now it existed only as a concept, and concepts are much easier to ignore. Her consulting practice reached a steady rhythm, not growth, balance. She turned away clients who wanted her to fix things quickly. There is no quick fix for systems designed to erase people. There is only understanding and patience. Sometimes women arrived convinced their situation was unique. It never was. Different surnames, same behaviors. The monitored spending, the gentle discouragement of independence, the praise for being low maintenance. Jennifer never interrupted. She let them talk themselves into clarity. She had learned that silence, used correctly, is not submission, it's space. Ethan left home in time, not dramatically, just naturally. He chose a path that valued competence over authority, systems over personalities. He did not chase power, he studied it. Jennifer watched this with a quiet sense of relief. Cycles had a way of repeating when left unattended. This one, she thought, might actually stop. Grant's letters eventually ceased, not because he found peace, but because he ran out of people willing to read them. This is the unspoken punishment of fallen elites, not loss of comfort, loss of relevance. Lydia passed away in confinement, orderly, unrepentant, certain to the end that she had been correct. The family arranged a modest burial. Few attended, fewer spoke. History did not pause. The White Hope Trust name survived only in archived documents and footnotes. Students encountered it occasionally while researching financial misconduct. They moved on quickly. Jennifer encountered her own name in those same texts once, reduced to a line, a cooperating spouse. She closed the book and went for a walk. Recognition had never been the point. What mattered was the quiet redistribution of knowledge, the slow diffusion of awareness. That is how power actually weakens, not through spectacle, but through comprehension. Jennifer aged well, not gracefully exactly, honestly. She allowed herself to take up space, to speak plainly, to say no without apology. When she thought back on her years inside the House of White, it felt less like trauma and more like a study she had completed, an immersive one, not recommended, but thorough. She did not miss it. And if you listen closely to history, really listen, you'll notice something comforting. The grand families, the immaculate legacies, the institutions that insist they are eternal, they all end the same way, not with collapse, but with irrelevance. They fade into the background hum of things that used to matter, while individuals, quietly and stubbornly, continue forward. So as we let this story drift off, as we allow the House of White to dissolve into paperwork and memory, take this with you into sleep. Control is loud at first, but it is always fragile, and the people who learn how it works tend to outlast it. All right, let's rest here for a while. No more lessons, no more ledgers. Just the soft certainty that even the most carefully managed power structures eventually grow tired. And when they do, they let go.